Do you want to go ahead and put the next slide up, please? So we'll just give you a minute or two because we have a lot to pack in this afternoon. But we want to give you some time to think about your learning from this morning and begin to make connections to our work together as we collaborate around writing instruction. So take a minute and think about this question. When you think about an asset-based orientation to children, their families, and community, what connections are you making to our topic in this learning pathway around writing instruction? And feel free to go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. Thank you, Erin. Erin also put the question in the chat for you. We'll give you just a minute to do that. Choice and voice, yes. Honor familiar and cultural traditions and build upon them. Focus on purpose for writing, thank you. Giving students opportunities to choose. Authentic writing. Share their own cultures and identities. Remind myself to ask what the student is doing well in regards to writing. That's going to be a lot of our focus this afternoon. Thank you for sharing that.
Diane, you froze for a second there.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Encourage kids to write about topics they know and love. Assure students feel comfortable to share their culture. There's so much behind that statement, right? Building trust, building community, all the things that need to happen for them to do that. Seeing themselves as successful writers, wonderful. Okay, Erin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So we are just Diane and I and Lisa here today, and that's okay. We're sad that we don't have Dr. Gwendolyn Thompson-McMillan here in the space or Michelle Wagner. When we were planning this summer, when we sent out these breakout options to everyone in the network and we said, hey, choose your one, and we were convening around who was going to be facilitating which. I mean, we knew we needed Dr. Thompson-McMillan for this topic, and then we were excited to have Michelle Wagner from Wayne Risa and Diane here as well in this group. But as we were planning the summer, we knew that we would be missing those two here for just October. They will be back with us for December and on. We'll do our best. Our planning is informed by their wisdom and their scholarship, and really the planning of this session as we transition here now from what we did together in August. For most of you, you were part of those 3 days, those hour and a half at least across those 3 days each. But as we transition now into the year, into coming back together each quarterly meeting, we are committed to doing that right here at this time of each quarterly meeting, and to really start to enhance and build out that community of practice that we have, hopefully learning more and more from each other. And there's more to come today about ways to consider that. Diane, so glad you're here.
I'm happy to be here, and also missing Dr. Thompson-McMillan and Michelle, but as Erin said, their wisdom and their work has informed our planning for today, and we hope that you'll find value in what we have planned for you. So as we think about our learning this morning around asset-based thinking and asset-based assessment, assessment is a big part of writing. And we wanted to take some time to really focus on, when we're assessing students' writing, how are we doing it? Are we doing it with a deficit focus or an asset-based focused? And I'm going to say, through no fault of our own, most of us have come up through a system where we have been trained and guided to focus on deficits, to look at what's missing in the writing and try to target those things. And so we really want to spend some time today working on reframing our thinking so that we can really work toward helping students see their assets, build on their assets, and stop focusing on the deficits that can be so detrimental. So, Erin, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, and then I'm going to let you take it.
So we have a lot of different ways to interact together planned. And this one is just a personal reflection. So you'll need a piece of paper or a new tab if you're more of a typer than a writer. And you're not going to be sharing what you're writing right now. But take a few moments and list what you notice in this piece of writing. Anything at all that comes to mind. And let me read it out loud for you. Through the voice of the child who wrote it. Oops, back. I'm going to move my screen sharing window. There we go. This is an opinion piece about a book. My favorite book is Do You Want to Be My Friend? The mouse asked the horse if you will be my friend. The horse said no. The mouse found a friend. The mouse asked the later mouse if you will be my friend. The later mouse said yes. Help me out, anybody. I thought I had this practice.
They dig a hole in the ground.
They dig a hole. Lisa knows that this is your world.
This is my world.
This is your world with Maxton. They dig a hole in the ground. My favorite part is the horse. Anything you notice about this piece of writing, let's put some silence into our space. Your time, go ahead and chat. Okay, we know you could go on and on. We invite you to finish that thought you have been writing. And now we invite you to reflect on what you wrote down. Look across the things you noticed. What did you notice about the writing? Maybe you noticed things about what the writer was trying to do. But before you share those, thank you. Oh, you're so awesome. You've got a pattern in the chat. That's wonderful, Alyssa. That is fine. I just want you to first reflect on what you wrote and maybe categorize the things you noticed. Would you say a couple of the things you noticed might have had more of more of a frame around the assets that the writer was focusing on, or the opportunities to teach, which sometimes opportunities might be categorized as more of the deficits or the things that the writer isn't doing yet, or not doing correctly yet, or not doing fully yet. So if you were to categorize the things you noticed, as a literacy leader, like where would they fall? More in the asset category, more in the things that you would want to teach to improve. No need to say anything about that. That's just a personal reflection. But we do want to now go from just the personal to the community and be in a little bit of conversation. So we're going to start an activity in just a minute where you will go into breakout rooms. Diane is preparing breakout rooms so that we'll be able to be in a small group. And you're going to be able to look at this student writing or another one, and you'll get to choose which one you want to look at as a group. And the questions are, what assets do you see in the student's writing? And as you do that, you might need someone who's a facilitator who does the work of asking, and what else? And what else? What do we see the writer trying? What else do we notice? So as you're in that conversation, you're looking at one piece, it's apart from the writer. We don't know this writer. It's called a end of kindergarten or beginning of first grade sample opinion writing. I don't know that that's necessary because we know students write, all along that spectrum, but we don't know about the writer, but we have a lot of things we could notice about the writing and observations we could make as far as hunches about what the writer was trying. So let's just keep that conversation focused on the assets, the things we notice that we would compliment about this writing, or the things that the child is attempting, and do the work of pushing yourselves. What else? What else do we notice? What else? So Diane, there's another piece that they might choose instead of the favorite book with the mouse and the horse. They might choose to focus on this one. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Muted. This piece comes from a book titled, you probably can't see it because my screen is blurred, but Read Alouds with Heart. It is written by Dana Clark, Keisha Smith-Carrington, and Jigisha Vyas. And this is a response to reading sample. And it says, Marmy is tall and thin. She likes to get her hair done, party, and during the day, she is a paramedic that gets to ride in an ambulance. So we're going to put a link in the chat to a document that has both of these samples. Under each sample, it will give you the background information. So as Erin said, the first sample was a late kindergarten, early first grade opinion writing. This one is actually a fifth grader responding to the book In Our Mother's House by Patricia Polacco. And the teacher had prompted them by saying there are a lot of stereotypes about mothers in this book. Can you imagine a mother outside of these stereotypes? And this was what the student wrote. So, Erin, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, you can just go to the one with the prompts again. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. So this link has both samples and the reflection questions, the discussion questions on it. So go ahead and get that link open on your screen before I put you in the breakout rooms so that you can have that. And then once you're in your rooms, decide on which piece you want to discuss and have at it. So I'm going to give you just a minute to get that document open.
All right, so you were just a part of an activity, and we just invite you here for a moment to reflect on that activity and really Diane's question before we move to it. You know, you just experienced something where you and a colleague, another educator, were reflecting on a student's piece of writing. Just for that experience, you could put on the hat of like coach, facilitator of a professional learning session, you know, collaborator with other teachers of writing. And you could reflect on this through that lens of, have you ever done something like this before? How would you modify it? How would it support a group you might be working with? But you also might have that lens of, so what would you do to transfer this kind of an asset hunt in a piece of writing to work with students? So we're just going to invite you to reflect personally at this time. How did that feel? Most of you were in a conversation with one or two other people, and you were pushed to keep noticing and keep noticing. Did you have a moment in that conversation where it lulled, but then something that someone noticed kind of like took your conversation to another aspect of writing development? That happens often. And then all of a sudden, the things that we notice and talk about kind of get reinvigorated. And also, in addition to like how that felt to be in that process, do you see opportunities as you think about yourself as a coach or a leader of professional learning for using processes like this, where we're simply focusing on what a writer brings and what a writer tried and all of the assets we notice? Do you see an opportunity, or maybe you already use a process like this in your own setting?
Do you want us to talk, Erin?
So this is a personal reflection. I'm just looking
Okay.
at 3 different questions right now for us, because I imagine that we might be like across a continuum where some people are like, I used to do this all the time when I taught, you know, or this was a process that we've tried before, or maybe it's something that's kind of new, but is it something personally that you might try or continue or modify? So in relation to that experience, do feel free to start to put any reactions you might have in the chat. at this time, either about how it felt or if this would be replicable in your work,
Peggy, did it say?
or if you would modify it. Because what did we hear this morning? Diane and I met at lunch and we are like, this is so connected. So before we look at the chat as you're putting ideas in, I'm going to read this out loud for emphasis. Dr. Cooper Stein said today, when you're helping someone grow in a new area, you begin by building on their strengths. And it isn't enough for teachers and coaches to notice strengths. The individuals, students need to hear and notice their existing strengths too. And then we had one more connection to this quote that so many people named this morning from the teacher Angela Daniels in the video quoting her dad. If you ever want something out of a child, accuse them of it first. So thinking about that experience, let's look at the chat and consider the different modifications, the challenges that might have, happened in the conversation, or what you're thinking as far as how you could use this.
So Leslie said it felt more motivational to focus on the positives. And I think, Leslie, we talk about how it's more motivational for kids, but we don't think about how it's also more motivational for us. So thank you for sharing that. And Michelle said, I appreciate the challenge of only naming assets. It forced me to celebrate what the student can do. And I think, Michelle, that goes to the point earlier of, we've come up through a system where we've been forced to focus on the deficits. And it's such a big part of our mindset that it is something we have to practice and work at to focus on the assets.
Mm-hmm. Colleen lifts, it'd be powerful to do with a grade level team focusing on a writing sample, especially coming from this asset-based thinking. Yeah, and we just challenge you, if you might replicate something like this, or if this is something that is already a part of your community, that it's okay to stay asset-based for a really long time. When we think about even transferring this to how we teach and notice with kids, the work that they're doing as a writer, it's okay for a really long time to only focus on what they're already doing, like for weeks. It feels maybe different than what we've done before. It doesn't mean we don't get to instruction, but it means we solidify what they're already doing, and they're already doing something. And so it is such a temptation for us to go from, wow, look what you did here. Now I'd love to teach you this next thing. And that can happen in a very asset-minded voice and truly from a heart that sees all the things a child does. There's a video of it in our module for Essential 1 around motivation and engagement, where the teacher really does work with a child around writing in a conference. And it's not that we don't move on to teaching. We are doing a lot of research with kids to identify when they're ready for that. But sometimes we just need the reminder that it's okay to stay with the positives, and for maybe longer than what we have done before. Because, man, Angela Daniels' example, it has really spurred new life in me, thinking about what it means to really teach and notice and accuse kids of all the things they're already doing first and sticking there.
Thank you, Erin. Couple of things I've noticed in the chat. Danielle said, appreciate the power of a thought partner. So many times when we are looking at students writing, we're doing it in isolation, and thought partners can be so helpful in helping us see things that aren't coming to the surface for us. And Haley said, I found the power in and what else? And that question, Erin and I talked about when we push ourselves to say, what else, what else, what else? We really see things that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. And Lisa, thank you for lifting. I wonder what this protocol could look like if it was student-led with permission from the writer, of course. So think about putting our students in collaborative groups and focusing on the strengths. What a gift that would be for them. Um,
Hey,
okay, so
Diane,
yes.
when I was picturing that, I was thinking about Nadra Shami. She's a consultant out of Dearborn Public Schools, and she leads a lot of, we've had welcome Nadra into the network before. She leads a lot of strategies for supporting English learners. And when I attended one of her workshops, she did a protocol similar to this, where educators were in a circle and they all had the writing, and everybody kind of went around, and we were just like going around the circle until we had exhausted, you know, all of the strengths. And it was really powerful because the intent there was to show that English learners, we can build off their assets. So I had this vision in my head, if you had really nice culture and climate in your classroom, if you had a circle of students and you're able to look at different writing with permission from students. But I was thinking about this from a young, like even my son's kindergarten class. If you had that culture and climate and you were able to go around and talk about that, it would also allow you to realize what the kids knew about the writing, because it's a process in itself to have kids be able to recognize and notice that's punctuation, or that's, I mean, those, I would imagine those would be the things that they talked about, punctuation and spelling and maybe some sight words, or as they call them. So anyway, I was just imagining that. So that was where my thinking was.
Well, and Lisa, I think that's so beautiful because we also know that kids learn a lot from each other. So as one student is lifting what they see as a strength, other students are potentially saying, oh, I could put that in my writing too. So that's why I think it would be such a gift for them. I do think it's important though, what you said about you have to have the right culture and climate in your classroom before you launch kids into this. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to shift our focus now from focusing on the piece of student writing to thinking about our role as coaches when we talk about asset-based practices as it relates to writing. So I think I need the next slide. Please, thank you. So I want you to take a minute to think about this question, and then feel free to share in the chat or unmute if you want to just speak your thoughts. In your role as a coach, what are you doing to model within yourself, with teachers, and with kids a fascination around writing? How do you find joy in coaching around writing? And I'm going to add to this, maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you haven't found joy in coaching around writing yet. I hope that's not the case. But if you haven't, how has today, what we've done, what we did this morning and what we've done so far in this session helped you think about how you might find joy in coaching around writing and model within yourself a fascination around writing? So take a minute to think about that and share in the chat or unmute. Some really beautiful things being shared in the chat. And we'll save this chat, and Erin, we can link it in the agenda, right? So you'll be able to go back and look. Many of the comments have been focused around celebrating student writing, giving students opportunities to share their writing, whether that's sharing it by reading it or posting around the classroom, but celebrating their writing. And some of the comments have focused on your work with teachers, asset-based conversations with teachers around the process of teaching writing and encouraging teacher reflection around their strengths as a writing teacher. And Catherine shared that. Thank you, Catherine, because I think maybe some of us feel this way, but I know many of our teachers don't have a high level of confidence around teaching writing. And that's why in so many classrooms, writing isn't being taught to the extent that it should. And so when we can have an asset-based conversation with teachers around their teaching of writing, we can build their confidence and their efficacy and hopefully help them feel more confident about teaching writing. Thank you for sharing that. Modeling in classrooms is really important. Sharing the joy of cultivating writers and not necessarily final writing pieces. So talking about drafts and the strengths in those drafts, building a community of writers, sharing journals, So lots of great things here. Michelle said, I value talking with students about their writing and celebrating the stories they have to tell. Students often reveal who they are when they write. And when you see them through their work, they shine. It is joyful. So lots of really brilliant ways to find joy in our work around writing. Erin, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you for sharing all those thoughts. So we're going to put you back into your breakout rooms. I believe you're going to be back in the same group you were in. Whoops, can you go back one slide, Erin? Please. Nope, other way. Thank you. So here's the question that we want you to focus on. And Erin, if you don't mind putting that in the chat while I talk through it, we really want you to think about, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like as a coach to implement asset-based writing practices? Think about this in all the different ways that you work in your environment. So what does it look like, sound like, and feel like to coach a teacher or a group of teachers around asset-based writing practices? What does it look like, feel like, sound like if you are modeling in a classroom and working with students around asset-based writing practices? What does it look like, sound like, feel like if you are leading professional development for your staff or groups of staff around asset-based writing practices? So think about that question in all the many roles and many hats that you wear in your position. And I'm going to go ahead and put you in the breakout groups. All right, I think we have everybody back. I hope that you had some good discussion. We would love if somebody from one or two of the groups would be willing to share a big idea that came out of your discussion, or feel free to put in the chat some big ideas that came out of your discussion and any big aha moments.
Diane, I don't mind sharing if you are looking for someone still.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle Walber. This is going to be brief, but we did some really fabulous processing, and it was very nice to have our collaborative thinking shared, because we thought of things that others in the group maybe hadn't had time to think of, or just it wasn't happening for them. But in the end, we landed on all of this work that we've done today, not just this morning, but this afternoon in the session feels very healthy, not just for us, but for students as well. And so we just I wanted to share on behalf of our team that writing is can feel so unhealthy and stressful and demanding and complicated and complex, and to walk away from our breakout room feeling like just looking for assets is enough right now, and such a healthy thing to do. So I just thought I would share that.
Thank you, Michelle. It brings me joy just to hear you say that it's, lifting writing out of sometimes what feels like such a heavy load, right? And bringing joy to it. Thank you. Leslie shared in the chat, teachers were more apt to take risks and try new things when you focus on the positives. Any other thoughts, big ideas you want to share?
I love what Erin shared, and I jotted it down in a sticky about just that nudge of staying with the positives for longer. So what that can look like when working with teachers and students. And Melissa, share the part that you took away from I loved.
Well, our person in our group, and I think it was Peggy, was it Peggy? Anyway, she was talking about putting these I can statements so that the kids reviewed the I can statements before they started their writing. And then I said, well, what if we took that quote from Angela Daniels and we said, if you ever want something out of a child, accuse them of it first. So what if we made their I can statements an accusation of what they can do in their writing, and then they read them, I can write with punctuation, right?
I can. Maybe they're not doing it yet, but just tell them they are.
Yeah.
And then they'll just do it, right?
Yeah.
I can write with punctuation. Yes, I can.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, Erin, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and take us into our resource hunt?
Yeah, sounds good. So some of you, when you selected being a part of conversations this year, starting in August around writing instruction, some of you were kind of like, I need to build my toolkit, you know, the Essential 6 has some great guidance. That's like a table of contents, but like, what else? Like I need those strategies, those tools that I can guarantee are research supported. So we probably have about half of us who've been in this network for quite a while and half of us maybe-ish who haven't. And even if we've been in work for a while, sometimes some of the things that we've done before, it's like, that looks familiar, but it wasn't really my focus. So it doesn't look familiar now, but now it's important to me. So you're going to get a chance in just a second to personally make a decision about the next activity and go either with choice 1 or choice 2. It's like those good old choose your own adventure books. And I'm going to put something in the chat because some of you might just want to open it up as you listen to me. I'm just going to set it up. It's pretty simple. We want to give you time here, and we don't even need the slides right now, Diane. I was going to share my screen actually and show the thing. So let me just, I can do that. No problem. So it's a resource hunt. It's just really simple, but we wanted to make sure that in this time together, and knowing that we'll have Dr. Thompson McMillan and Michelle Wagner again next time, but we wanted to make sure you had a little bit of time actually kind of like, getting into the nitty gritty of the research supported practices that might fill your toolbox or refresh your toolbox right now. So you are going to get to make 2 choices actually. There are 2 key resources that we've explored in some depth in the past that give us more than what the essentials provide. And they were selected again today because if you're in a place where you just want more of those practices and ideas at your fingertips, then these are our, as a network, first go-to texts. So I want to pause there though. We do use the standards, our Michigan standards, and we do use the practices as frameworks for this work that we do around writing instruction. So maybe those are like the umbrella, but then right underneath that, of course, we use the endnotes of the essential practices for some of those go-to resources that the researchers recommend. And I think these are in there, but if they're not, these are things that as a network we've dug into. They're really big here on this document, and your first choice will be which one you want to dig into here for a few minutes, knowing that you could read them in more depth for yourself after this time. Okay, so that's the first choice you're going to make, either going into a Path to Better Writing Instruction, Evidence-Based Practices in the Classroom by Steve Graham and his colleague Harris. We worked with this text a year and a half ago, I think. I don't know how I remember all that kind of stuff because I don't remember other things in my life, but I just like put things into timelines. You're going to find explicit ideas for teaching writing throughout that text, but to save your time today, you might scan to find the bullets. They're like a few pages into that article, and you might just want to go to those bullets and use those as your first look today for that like collection of suggestions for instruction around writing that we know are tried and true. We know they're research supported. Steve Graham is one of the experts in our field around writing. Or maybe you'll want to open up again for the first time the IES practice guide around writing called Teaching Elementary Students to Be Better Writers in the What Works Clearinghouse. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's not that old, but it really is another, again, collection of things that we know work and have evidence behind them. And here's just a little tip here. You see these little bullets under each resource. To save your time today, you might want to go right to page 4. That's a table of contents, page 4, 5, 6. And then use that to choose an area of interest, maybe an aspect of writing that you know teachers are wondering about, or that you have a hunch teachers will be wondering about when you serve them, and then go right to the nitty gritty. So we want to offer this time for you so that you're actually in the nitty gritty of some stuff. But once you make that choice about what you're going to be looking at, then you get to make another choice. We're getting meta here. So once you've chosen them and you've opened that document, then you might have invitation 1 fit more for you or invitation 2. So if you're new to this resource or you don't remember it, no shame. Open it up, use those text tips to get into the strategies. And then knowing our time is limited, feel free to just read through some of those explicit ideas and consider how they might support your work. and bookmark that baby and decide when you might want to read it again, but at least you've got something and you've had a little time with the structure of that text and how it might support you. A lot of people in the network use these two resources as their go-to as a first place. Or maybe that's not you. Maybe you're like, yeah, I know those two resources. I'm in them already. Then we have a challenge for you. Open one of them, scan it, and look for language that's used about writers or about writing. And we're curious about how that language is asset oriented or how you might modify language and use different language than what's offered to describe the exact same strategy. It's not that the strategy or the idea isn't research supported, but if as a field we're thinking carefully about how we talk about writers and writing, then this might be a way for us to think about what we do as coaches when we might have a resource, but then we translate language around it when it comes out of us. It doesn't change the validity of the thing. It's just the challenge for us as literacy leaders to be accountable to the language that we use. So, which invitation fits for you? Which resource is valuable to you? This is your personal time. You deserve that too. So, you've got the resource in the chat. Go ahead and dig around for yourself. And we're going to be doing this for, again, 8 minutes. And then we'll come back. We know it's just a start, but you deserve this. So let's go ahead and pause. You can pause your video if you'd like. If anyone needs any support, that's fine, but this is not a breakout thing right now. This is a personal read and enjoy time. Okay, so I do invite us to lift back up out of that place we were at and start to tie that up and come back together. I am. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second because I just want to point one thing out that I noticed, and I'm going to invite 2 people to name an aha for themselves. So maybe that's you. So be thinking about what you might name. But I just wanted to make a connection for myself. I was trying to do the invitation number 2 and read through the IES practice guide. And, you know, a lot of the recommendations don't have judgmental language one way or the other, you know, so I was just trying to think about like, thinking about the conversation we've had as coaches about asset-based language. There was one place in one of the recommendations where it talked about poor handwriting, and I played with it a little bit, and I was like, you know, I don't know if I would always say poor handwriting, but I was like underdeveloped handwriting, younger handwriting, you know, there's synonyms for things that we read that we would maybe naturally translate. I don't know. But then I got into this recommendation number 4, and even though I remember this, I couldn't believe how connected it was to what we had done together in August, if you were there either in person or on Zoom, because one of the things we were doing, and it may have been explicit or not until we kind of moved through some of those days, but what we were doing with Dr. Thompson McMillan and Michelle and Diane and I was starting to create that engaged community of writers, but for ourselves. We did some writing and it was so powerful, almost emotional for some of us. We thought around some of the recommendations here underneath number 4. And so look at this. How to carry it out. Teachers should participate as members of the community by writing and sharing their writing. That is one of our big things we did together in August and thought about how we could take that into our work. So that was just an aha I had. How about 2 people who would name? We'll just do a number 1 and a number 2. We'll stack it first before we decide it. So I'm looking at you, but you don't have to wave. You could put your name in the chat. Who are 2 people who could share an aha from that conversation? I'm making eye contact with a half of us who have our video on, but waiting for 2 people who wouldn't mind unmuting. It was a quick practice, so it's understandable if we're kind of like, what would I share about that? Dig into those resources.
Even if you want to share what the process was like for you versus something specific that you found in the text.
I can share. This is Alina.
Thank you, Dr. Fortenberry.
Okay, after the echoing stops. So I was just we were looking at the What Works Clearinghouse and just seeing how some of the recommendations connect to the essentials was an aha for me. For example, students writing daily and that engagement piece and how we are to engage the students in the writing process. I'm just looking over the essentials and seeing how it really connects to that What Works Clearinghouse for the writing piece.
Absolutely. And our decision-making tree of like, okay, so we're going to focus on this. We always have the standards as well as essentials, as guide, but then this What Works Clearinghouse is kind of like a next step to bring to life some of the bullets of the essential. Thank you for naming that. And Michelle would echo that in just the value of bringing key resources back to our attention, even if we've dug into them before, but perhaps through this new lens. Revision of the K-3 instructional practices and the school-wide practices, which we kind of in shorthand call the organizational practices now. I mean, like the revision of them, the updating of them just seems to continue to provide so many opportunities for us, to dig in and look more closely, but also opportunities in the ways that we serve teachers and center back in on their practice. So yeah, coming back to work and thinking about them through new lenses like this lens today is so helpful. So it was just a little tease really when you think about it. It was like a quick open up, but now you have it, you could bookmark it, and Diane's going to dive into some thoughts around what's next possibly for this group, and maybe either of these resources would help or other things you're thinking about.
Great, thank you. Michelle Shepherd, did you want to share something? I thought I saw your hand go up for a second.
Yeah, I was connecting this to some work with a teacher that I'm with right now on opinion writing. And I've used the What Works Clearinghouse with a grade level before, and I'm reflecting on how I could have done a better job with that. That's one thing for me. The other one was as I'm working with this teacher on this opinion writing and trying to make it authentic and relevant and collecting data and reviewing our data and going back from today and focusing on that asset-based development with our students to see where they're at in that baseline. But also she was talking about doing a persuasive writing piece about donuts and convincing a donut shop to pick their students' donut. I'm not exactly sure, but I wanted to relate this back to community. And this community, as far as I know, doesn't have a donut shop. So how might we be able to connect what she's thinking with something that's already in the community? Perhaps it's the local pizza place, or perhaps it's the Mexican restaurant there. And how can we make it more authentic and relevant in the community? So that's kind of my takeaway or my aha or go back to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. That's really, it gives me, when you were talking, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that is so important. And so, I'm just so happy you lifted that for all of us, because I think sometimes we forget. So thank you. Erin, do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, please? Maybe the next one. Okay, so this pathway is called Collaborating Around Writing Instruction. And one of the things that Erin and I talked about in planning for today was how do we enable your collaboration to continue beyond and between our quarterly meetings when we have these opportunities to continue to advance our learning and share our thinking. And so we really want to try to work toward, providing some opportunities for you in between the meetings. Erin, can you go ahead and go to the next slide, please? So go ahead and go to the next one, because I know we're low on time, and we can come back to this if we have time. So some of the possibilities that we have talked about would be to offer a monthly Zoom chat to share ideas, challenges, and successes that you're facing in between our meetings. And it would be really great if just right now you could put in the chat, I'm interested. If attending a monthly meeting is something that you would be interested in. And then I'll collect all of your names if you're interested and send you an email, and we'll try to coalesce around some times that might work for you and see if we can make that happen. So that's the first thing, is go ahead and put in the chat if you're interested in maybe a monthly meeting time. So we'd be talking about one in November, and then in December we have another quarterly meeting, and then we'd meet in January, and then we have a quarterly meeting in February, right? So, and then March and April. So that would be one idea. Another idea that we're talking about is creating a digital platform for you that you could just visit on a regular basis and pose questions in, share challenges, share resources, share ideas, share successes. I tried this thing with my staff or my teacher that I'm coaching, and it was amazing. Because when we share those things, and then we can reach out to you and say, well, how did you do that? What did you do? It helps all of us to grow in our practice. So we're really looking into thank you, Chandra. We're really looking into maybe providing that type of resource for you. And if you have other ideas for how we might be able to support you in collaborating between these meetings, please feel free to email either Erin or myself. Both of our email addresses are there on the slide, and share those with us. So we're going to work really hard on making that happen for you. And Erin, I'm going to let you, or actually, I think we need to go to the next slide for some time on reflecting. So this morning, I think it was Lisa asked you to think about your intentions for the day, and think about Dr. Muhammad's 5 pursuits around identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. And maybe pick one of these 5 and think about how the day has gone for you in relation to the intention you set this morning. And see if you can answer one or more of these 5 questions. This is just something for you to take a moment and think
Diane
about.
just froze again.
Oh, go ahead, Erin. Take it over, Erin, because I'm
There
not
you go.
sure
You're
what'll
back.
happen
You're
again.
back.
Okay, I'm not sure where I dropped off. So
You said in relation to, think about these in relation to, and then we lost about 10 seconds.
okay, I'm so sorry. Think about these in relation to the intention you set for yourself this morning. You're learning from today, and what has it done for you in regards to one or more of these 5 pursuits? So you don't need to share this. This is for your own reflection. We'll give you a minute to do that, and then Erin is going to talk about a reflection for the day.
Diane, that was a minute. We have just a couple minutes before moving on to our last thing. Did you have a reflection that you would be willing to share?
So this whole day has felt so powerful to me. And I've spent my last few years really focusing my work around student motivation and engagement. And this whole focus on asset-based thinking is so connected to that work. And many of you have lifted in our session this afternoon how when we focus on student assets, it increases their motivation and engagement. And some of you have even lifted how it increases our own motivation and engagement. So I think, I think when I think about these 5 pursuits, I think we have hit on every single one of them pretty heavily today. In particular, I think we've touched on criticality and how to really make sure that when we're focusing on student assets, it's focused on them, their culture, their identity, and thinking about the assets of our classroom communities as a whole, thinking about the assets of the communities of our staff as a whole, and how we can lift them up as individuals and as groups. So I think for me, that's kind of my reflection on the day. Thank you, Erin. How about for you?
Oh, I don't want to, overshadow just your words living in our space right now, because I don't have depth other than to add to just the the joy, though we were talking about hard things, I'm just simply thinking about the joy of being able to be with other people who do our job. And often in our world, we're not with people who do our job. Early literacy coaching is not a role that, that usually in the school or the district or districts we serve, like we're often the only ones. So just the joy of being together and the ability to wrestle with thoughts and apply and do hard work with a lot of different resources and voices, it's just always refreshing to be in that space together. So that's my simple reflection. Thank you for your leadership, Diane. It really brings it home. Well,
Thank you, Erin.
yeah. So we're not quite done, but we are getting there. So we just want to support your wayfinding with the things that we did explore today and how they connect to what we did in August. There might be some of us here today who just were not able to be a part of August or all 3 of those days. So we want to make sure you're all set with what we already did do, in case that is supportive to you. So in this time right here, that's concluding this 1:30 to 2:55 time, you already clicked on this because you got here. So we have this landing page for all of the breakouts, and we're here in this middle section. You clicked here on the Zoom, but we wanted you to see that we have the recordings of the days in August, if that would be important, especially if you're kind of like, yeah, one of those processes we did together is something I want to recreate. For any staff I serve, and you might want to watch that again and think about how you would modify that. But the other thing we have is our resources shared. This is just, going to grow throughout the year. We just wanted you to know it's here. It will always be here. We've got all of our August resources, the recordings, the slides. The article that we looked at today was named in there, as well as Sarah Shoemaker's podcast, the Kent ISD podcast, interviewing one of the authors of the article today, Dr. Steve Graham. So that's a really useful resource if that article sparked some interest for you. So for today, really, like those are the 2 articles. Here is that writing samples discussion questions document that Diane created for us with the samples right there. In case you want to use that and modify that, you can make a copy. We will link our slides here right now too, as well as the recording of the session in this document. So just wanted you to see visually where those things are so that you feel like you have what you need when you need it later. And so our last couple minutes here, we just want to give you time to start the reflection form. We're not going to put the sketch form in the chat, but I am going to put the link right to our reflection form directly in the chat here. But just know that you'll need to go back into today's full agenda in order to click on that sketch form and complete that, should you want the hours. So here we go.
I put the link in the chat already. Oh, there you go. You did.
Oh, you're so good. Thank you. And I'd already pushed enter before I heard
No
you.
worries.
Thank you, everyone, so much. If you would be so kind as to spend these last couple minutes, or last minute, or over a minute here. I know it'll take more than a minute to complete this, but hopefully it's pretty quick for you. That would be really, really helpful. As you saw today, we use everybody's feedback in that and we adjust. So we will be in touch for next steps. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Erin.